the Lord Jesus. I want to welcome you out to our Sunday school, and we have been looking at the issue of growing graceful in the seasons of life. And these are kind of overviews of different times and seasons in a lot of our lives. Now, some of these, again, we're going to get ahead of you. Some of these may not apply yet, or maybe even at all. But there are principles we can take away from each and every one of these concerning the issues of life. So let's get our main text and a few scriptures to get us started this morning. I need Psalms 90, verses 10 through 12. Jeremy, that's our main text. And then I need other end of the book, Genesis 1 and verse 28. Mike? Carrie, would you get Proverbs 22:6? I need Ephesians 6:4. Steph? Deuteronomy 4:9. Mom? 2 Timothy 1:5. Darlene? 2 Timothy 3:15. Amy, and one more, Deuteronomy 11:18 through 20. Nelson. All right, that'll get us through the first part, which is outstanding. Okay, let's read our main text and focus in here on what Moses is saying.
The days of our lives are 70 years, and if by reason of strength they are 80 years, yet their boast is only labor and sorrow, for it is soon cut off and we fly away. Who knows the power of your anger? For as the fear of you, so is your wrath. So teach us to number our days, that we may gain a heart of wisdom.
May we gain a heart of wisdom, the New Living, that we may grow in wisdom. Gaining a heart, of course, functioning. And he makes out here the understanding of life. 70 years is still 80 years. By strength, the average life expectancy is for men is somewhere around 72, and the life expectancy for women is somewhere around 76. And so that's the average. Of course, there'll be as many over the average as under. But he says here that we may gain a heart of wisdom. And one of the principles of wisdom is knowing how to function successfully. If you're wise in money, you know how to function with money successfully. If you're wise with relationships, you know how to function with relationships successfully. If you're wise in different other areas, you're functioning successfully in that. And so here he says, in life, we need to function with wisdom and growing, because wisdom, the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result. And that's especially true as things change. I was listening to a podcast just recently, and the person was saying, I remember television when it would go off the air at 12 o'clock. It would play the national anthem, and it might come on at 5 o'clock, might come on at 6 o'clock in the morning, but it would go out, and that was standard. Back in the 70s, that's just what most television stations did. Now we have 5,000 billion channels that are all 24/7, and never mind platforms like YouTube and such that you can get all sorts of content any time of the day or night. But that wasn't the way it was. Things have changed. Life has changed. There was a time when a vehicle 100,000 miles was its death. Now vehicles can run 200,000-300,000 miles. That things change. You have more technology in your pocket or purse than the astronauts took to the moon. More computing power in your phone than the astronauts took to the moon. That's amazing. Things change. So does life. We looked in our original study that Paul says, when I was a child, but I'm not a child anymore. I thought like a child, I acted like a child, I spoke like a child, but since I've grown up, I've put away childish things, the growing of wisdom. And so last week we looked at the desire and function in marriage. That's just part of life, that you're going to have to learn to be wise in your marriage. And that's going to be some general understandings of marriage, and that's going to be some specifics for your marriage. Because that no two people are exactly the same. There is you give and take, strengths and weaknesses that you're going to have to understand. And so out of that, so the next stage that we want to look at then out of marriage is something that begins to flow, which is little children. Genesis 1:28.
Then God blessed them, and God said to them, be fruitful and multiply, fill the earth and subdue it. Have dominion over the fish of the sea, over the birds of the air, and over every living thing that moves on the earth.
He says, be fruitful and multiply. There's something in the hearts of many men and women, most, that want to have children. They want to have and be fruitful and be involved in that, because that's just part of life. That's a God-given desire that God's put into people, and that we would have. Children can be messy, expensive, sometimes heartbreaking, frustrating, lots of work, and yet people go, let's have another one, right? Because it's in the hearts of people, right? God bless, if you have young children, walking into work going, I only got like 3 hours of sleep last night because I don't know what their problem was, but they cried all night, and as soon as I had to leave, they fell asleep. And you're like, that's not fair. Right? And then let's have another one, right? And so it's in the hearts of men and women. God's put it there. That's part of the natural desires of life. And so in that, we have to understand that we are given a task as a parent, and that is to train, instruct, and nurture our children to be the men and women that will function for God and in society. Now, I could have, and it would have been very easy to get all sorts of statistics today on children, and I looked at some of them, and I thought, you know what, we all know this. You don't have to know the statistics to know that a breakdown in the family, a breakdown of parenting has caused great problems in our generation. And so I'm thinking if you're here at 9:30 on a Sunday morning, you're already trying to be a good parent. So let's not talk about the mistakes they're making out there. Let's talk about the things we can do to make that child or children into the best people that they can be. And so this starts when they're little. You can't wait on this. This starts when they can understand that you're beginning to tell them and instruct them on behaviors that are acceptable and not. I understand their personalities. I understand, especially when they reach that age, they call it, right around 2, when they really discover they have a will. And they can say no and be defiant and such. But the best time to teach children about issues of life is when they are young. Proverbs 22 and verse 6.
Train up a child in the way he should go, and when he is old, he will not depart from it.
Train, or as the New Living Translation, direct. So this is the principle here, is that directing or channeling onto a right path, that what you put into them when they're older will stay. Now, This doesn't mean that if you teach them Christianity at 2 years old that they're guaranteed to be saved. But what that does mean is it puts principles in their lives that they still can't escape, even if they don't serve God. And eventually they're going to make their own decisions. This word, direct or teach or train in some, literally means to narrow. It means to take all the options that are out there, all the behaviors, and narrow that in. It has to do with the words of discipline, dedicate, or train or teach. So you're training, you're teaching, you're showing them what is behavior that is acceptable and is not. And that is learned. I really wish when children were born they could give you this great manual in the hospital and say, here it is. This is what you're going to be dealing with. And today people use Google, which, we all know, if it's on the internet, it has to be true, right? So, there's all sorts, and you will find everything in every different direction. Absolutely, from, the most, Nazi-style tactics of discipline. We will have discipline in this house. Do you understand me? Right? To the, just let them do whatever they want to do. Just let them express themselves the way they want to feel. And, it doesn't matter what other people think or if it interrupts the school or the class. Just let them express themselves. And pretty soon they'll be expressing themselves with a gun in the schools or something. Right? So we have these two ultimate, but to bring it down, the balance. This is throughout Scripture, Ephesians 6 and verse 4.
And you, fathers, do not provoke your children to wrath, but bring them up in the training and admonition of the Lord.
The training and the admonition, or the discipline and instruction of the Lord. That word training, it literally is the word to educate. To train is what we would think about, to tutor or tutelage. It has to do with the thought of correction, of saying, hey, you know what? This is not acceptable. That is. There are certain behaviors in certain places that shouldn't be at all acceptable. And you train them, you educate them, you show them. The word discipline, the word instruction means to call to intention, and it actually has to do with the thought of a warning or a rebuke. Hey, don't do that. And the thought there of bringing in that admonition, training and teaching, passing on that which is acceptable behavior. Does that mean your children will never act up? If you're perfect, they'll never act up, right? Of course they're going to act up. Did you act up? Just think about that. One of the things that really helped us with children when we were raising our children is we often would remind ourselves, what did you do when you were that age? And we realized our children were probably far ahead of where we were. And then I found out a few things about my daughter. But anyway, but the reality is that she actually told me, Dad, you've heard enough. You're not going to hear anymore. And so anyway, but that, we thought, man, we used to lie, we used to do this, we used to do that. So we could catch them and try to instruct them, warn them, rebuke them, bring them correction. And that is to raise them. That is to create in them being an acceptable member of society, an acceptable member that will be responsible and not be a burden to others, that will cause you We'll talk about this too because it can cause you problems later. We're going to talk about teenagers and the teenage years in our next study because they're two different issues. You can't treat a 3-year-old and a 14-year-old the same. And you shouldn't. Because a 14-year-old far more, has some much more abilities to reason than a 3-year-old. But to instruct, to bring this to knowledge, Deuteronomy 4 and verse 9.
Only be on your guard and diligently watch yourselves, so that you don't forget the things your eyes have seen, and so that they don't slip from your mind as long as you live. Teach them to your children and your grandchildren.
So here even is a step beyond, not just your children, your grandchildren. That there's a responsibility that continues on, putting things into their lives that in the early years are so critical. One person wrote, it's actually two sisters wrote a book, and they said if you live right, chances are your children will too. That's if you make sure to teach them everything. What you don't teach them, someone else will, and you may not like the lessons. And there's so much truth in that you're teaching and putting into them. And of course, you're going to have to live it. They're going to have to see that lifestyle play out. If you're going to tell them certain things are wrong, it's, I remember, and I had good parents, but my dad would tell me, you don't start smoking, but he'd say that with a cigarette in his hand. And that didn't stop either my brother and I from smoking cigarettes. And so there were times in life that, your behavior, your action are going to speak greater than your words. It's amazing to me. People who look for advice will go to, a great example I read is, would you go to a person whose teeth are rotting out to ask them oral hygiene advice? And the issue, of course not. So therefore, you're looking for people who would know what they're talking about. And so if you're going to teach your children about areas of life, and it's not always wrong to say, I don't know. Or, in the issue of a young child, we'll talk about that later. Right? They're asking questions, maybe about the birds and the bees. It's probably not the time to get into that. Mommy, where do babies come from? True story. When my daughter-in-law got pregnant, they were announcing it to my daughter's children. And one of her daughters, one of my granddaughters, said to my daughter-in-law, "How did the baby get in your belly?" We laughed, but it's like, you know what? That's a discussion for another time. That's not going to be for now. She's 7 at the time, 7 or 8. No. She doesn't need to know anything about that right now. So there are ways of putting that off. We're going to look at next week that when you're dealing with teenagers, you need to have those kinds of conversations, but not with a 3-year-old. And so, very important, but you're teaching them, you're putting things in them, and you've got to think about this. This is especially true about the things of God. 2 Timothy 1:5.
I remember your genuine faith, for you share the faith that first filled your grandmother Laus and your mother Eunice, and I know that same faith continues strong in you.
So Paul is writing to Timothy, and he says, you know what? Your grandmother and your mother. Now, it's very interesting here that fathers aren't mentioned, grandfathers aren't mentioned. It's believed that Timothy, it's not believed, it's actually stated in the scriptures, his mother was a Jew, a believing Jew, but his father was a Greek. And when it says that, it implies that he was not a believer. He was not born again. He was not believing in Jesus Christ. And so the faith that was put in him, he says, your genuine faith that started with your grandmother, came to your mother, and then was put into you by them, which I know is real. And so we have an opportunity. Part of this, of course, was the scriptures, 2 Timothy 3:15.
And how from infancy you have known the Holy Scriptures, which are able to make you wise for salvation through faith in Christ Jesus.
Infancy is which version is that? NIV? So this is implying just what this means from childhood, from a very young age. This was being put into Timothy. Scriptures, who God is, why we serve God. It's not bad to let them know parts of your testimony. They probably don't need all the details. They probably don't want all the details. Right? But it's good to let them know. I remember the first time my daughter heard part of my wife's testimony, a part she didn't ever imagine. And she was really taken aback by that. Like, wow, you really did change. You really are different. And so to let them know, what does it say about God? Who Jesus is? What did he do for us? That it's not just left to the Sunday school teachers who do a very good job. But we can't, if you're saying 1 hour a week is going to undo my 167 hours of not teaching. You know, I'm learning Dutch. We're on Duolingo, and I'm learning Dutch. And so I take a 5-minute lesson a day, and often I'm doing it as I'm getting in bed. And so, you know, just recently I'm realizing, you know what, some of these words, they're sticking, but it seems like they're not sticking like here. They're sticking like way back here in the back bottom corner of the basement of my mind. And I'm like, oh, I kind of remember that word, right? Because I'm not, the best way to learn a language is immersion. Just get in it. It's true of lots of other things. It's true of God. If you're leaving that for Sunday school, if you're just leaving that for the teachers, and again, they do a great job, but that should be a supplement, not the only teachings of God. This could be true of power of prayer, morals, faith. It's not bad to know your children when you're going through it, saying we're going to believe God for this issue. Rather than just, try to make excuses. See, the reality is lifestyle will play out in your children. And they'll tattle on you. I've shared this story before, but it was so realistic to us. My wife and I were very involved in my children's school. We were on the PTA. In fact, the PTA used to meet on Wednesday nights. And because me and Carrie couldn't make it on Wednesday nights, they moved it to Tuesday nights. So that because I was pretty much the only male that went besides the principal on any kind of regular basis. And I got to know the principal. He's a good guy. He helped us out. When we had puppies, he arranged for us to be able to bring the puppies into the school, the golden retriever puppies, and all of the kindergarten class with my son and all of the second grade class with my daughter. They brought them all down. I'm thinking, this is the greatest advertisement I could ever have. These kids are going to go home, tell their parents about these cute golden retriever puppies that were brought into school and that they're for sale. And so, could work out. Didn't sell one from it, but we did have a good time with it anyway, with the kids and all. It was just a great time. But golden retrievers, puppies, and kids just are in natural flow together. They're just, And so we're sitting there and we're in this meeting and all of a sudden my daughter says, "Mr. Burgess, do you know what my parents were talking about at dinner tonight?" And we're thinking, oh no, were we mocking this meeting already? Because it was worthy to be mocked. It really was. They needed by law to buy scissors. This is one example. They needed by law to buy new scissors for the kindergarten classroom. It was going to cost $400. They had over $15,000 in the PTA account, and they wanted to debate this for half an hour. Like, at the end, you're going to have to buy the scissors anyway, right? A couple of husbands got together, and I was on this committee. We were doing the fields. And it would take us 15 minutes to get this meeting done. So it just different, the way the meeting was run. And so my wife and I panic when my daughter says, "Do you know what we were talking about at dinner?" And he winks at me and he goes, "No, Carly, tell me, what were your parents talking about at dinner?" And she said something about wearing seatbelts or something in the car, and we were like, whew. But I say that story to say this: what you do inside your home, your children will pick up on, even at a young age. She was probably in kindergarten or first grade at that time. 5 or 6 years old. They'll pick up on it. They pick up on a lot. And you're going to discover that even at a younger age. And so as you also teach them good, they're going to pick up on that by their nature. Deuteronomy 11, 18 through 20.
So commit yourselves wholeheartedly to these words of mine. Tie them to your hands and wear them on your forehead as reminders. Teach them to your children. Talk about them when you are at home and when you are on the road, when you're going to bed and when you're getting up. Write them on the doorpost of your house and on your gates.
And so no matter where you're going, what you're doing, teach them to your children. Teach them in the goings, in the comings, at home, wherever it might be, wherever you're at, in the morning, in the evening, and put that out there for them to learn. And so this especially begins at a young age. I will say this, and then we'll open it up for some questions and look at a different area of that, or this area of raising children. But there are some wonderful resources out there. There are some wonderful, a lot of you grew up on Salty or, Veggie Tales or Adventures in Odyssey and these kind, and they're not bad. They can, be a great opportunity for kids to learn scriptures, songs about scriptures, and just have them. So my kids, the two things they love to go to bed with, we used to play for them, was either Salty, the train that they would just sing scriptures. They wrote songs and they would sing scriptures, and I would catch the kids singing them. Or they liked to go to bed with the band that I was in in Chicopee. I had made a cassette, and so sometimes they liked to go to bed with that rock and roll music, which may have damaged them, I don't know. But anyway, but they would sing it. They would know scriptures, and that's why it's very good. They're wonderful resources. So are there any questions or comments? Okay, so then let's just get some more scriptures. I need 1 Samuel 3, 12 and 13. Who would get that? Alicia? Then I need Proverbs 15, 20. Aiden? Proverbs 10 and verse 1, Mike. Proverbs 17 and verse 21, Steph. Darlene, Proverbs 13:24, and one more, Proverbs 23:13 and 14, Cynthia. Okay. So one of then the issues that you have to put into children, and you can't wait for too long, is rules, limits. Making limits in the early years. One person said, either you are training your children or they are training you. You're either going to train them or they're going to train you in their behavior. And again, before they can speak, yeah, when they cry, you're going to have to respond. But I remember the night where I had told my wife, no, we're going to let her cry. And she's going to not be able to just demand that we get up with her. And it was hard, but we did it. 1 Samuel 3 and verse 12 and 13.
In that day I will perform against Eli all that I have spoken concerning his house, from beginning to end. For I have told him that I will judge his house forever for the iniquity which he knows, because his sons made themselves vile, and he did not restrain them.
Restrain or discipline. Now, these boys were older. They were married, they were having children, they were older on in the Lord, but the indictment doesn't come against the boys as much as it comes against, this is Hophnius and Phinehas. It's against Eli. Dad, you didn't do this. So he puts this out there that, you know what, there's a responsibility on setting the limits. And younger is better. Number of areas I've put in, there's going to be others that you can talk about limits. One is definitely an issue today of screen time. We're going to talk about this next week. My son, when he got to be a teenager, again, we'll talk about this next week, but, one of the worst disciplines we could do to him is suspend him from a week from the computer. I mean, he would rather have had anything else than to have screen time taken away. Tech entrepreneurs Bill Gates and Steve Jobs, founder of Microsoft, founder of Apple, restricted their children from using the same tech gadgets that they had created. It is actually quite well known, at least in the tech industry, that these two tech moguls didn't allow their children their own cell phones until they reached specific ages. Last year, 2023, Bill Gates told the Mirror newspaper that he doesn't allow his kids, then ages 14, 17, and 20, to use gadgets during mealtime, and did not allow them to have smartphones until they were 14 years old. The main reason he had those rules in place is that he was worried about decreasing their quality of sleep and disrupting their sleep cycles. We often set time after where there is no screen time. We often set a time after which there is no screen time. And in the case that helps them to get to sleep at a reasonable hour, Gates told the newspaper, you're looking at how it can be used in a great way. Homework, staying in touch with friends, but it has also gotten to excess. Steve Jobs, who passed away a number of years ago, but in a 2014 interview with the New York Times, Nick Bilton was the reporter. He casually asked whether his kids liked the new iPad that had come out that year, his response said they haven't even used it. We limit how much technology our kids use at home. Now, it's very interesting that these two, out of, all the 8.5 billion people on the planet, that these two said, we've got to limit this. And so it's good to know that ahead of time. Kids are attracted to it. They flashing lights, we never lose that. That's why Vegas is as tacky and the Strip is lit up and as you can imagine, because that is what grasps people's attention. And so knowing that, you have to come to the conclusion, and this is personal. This is going to be what you as parents decide, what is reasonable, what is acceptable. So they're young. We're talking about young children. It's the time to know. It's amazing how 2-year-olds can figure out how to get a phone open. It's just fascinating to me. Like they get it. It's like they know technology from the womb. And it's like they come out and they're like, Dad, where's the cell phone? It's like, can I borrow your phone? A woman wrote, and she said, it's kind of one of those funny little quips. She says, I bet I'll be in the funeral, right, in the coffin, be an open casket, and one of my grandchildren will come up to me and say, Grandma, can I use your cell phone? She says, I bet that's going to happen, right? And so you just have to decide, and the earlier you decide, the better. Because it's going to be more helpful in life when you can say, no, we're going to limit this, we're going to restrict this, we're going to put this. Because if you try to do it later as a teenager, you're probably too late. Right now it's going to be on them to have to do this self-discipline. But that reality of limiting it. And so that's important. Another is, I think another area that you've got to teach them is public behavior. That you're saying what is acceptable in public. Proverbs 15 and verse 20.
A wise son makes a glad father, but a foolish man despises his mother.
So, a wise son, right? Wisdom is acting or knowing how to handle that specific area successfully. And manners and acceptable behavior is being lost. Schools are out of control. We all know that. Especially in more of the liberal states. We know that. We know that, we've all read that, who are the kids stealing the car? It's teenagers. And they're doing that deliberately because they know they'll be tried in juvenile court, not in adult court, and a lot of that will have no real ramifications on their life. The problem is the behavior will, and it's not going to change when they turn 18. But you and I, again, bringing this back to here, teaching them words like please and thank you. And again, a lot of you are doing a great job on this. And I know your kids are coming out, and we really do have some of the nicest kids as a group. They really are. Really, you've done one. But to understand this is to put it out there, just teaching your kids these kinds of things. We had a family that got saved in Chicopee. It was a single mom. She had 4 children. 2 were from the same father, but not in a row. Father 1, Father 2, Father 1, Father 3. Okay, that kind of family. When the oldest girl was 13, 14, she would call us for rides and different things to church. And my wife would answer the phone and say, hello? And she'd go, can I have a ride? She goes, no, Faith, let's try this again. Hi, this is Faith. How are you? Oh. You know, and you're going to have some conversation, not just demand. Right? Teaching them. And that starts at a young age. And again, they're going to have their personalities, and we all have our bad hair days, so of course they will as well. We miss things. They're going to miss things. They're going to miss a lot more than we do. But, you know, the magic word. How many grew up with the magic word? You can't have this until you say the magic word. And what was it? Please. Right? You're going to show some manners. And the earlier you teach them, the better that would be. What is acceptable in public? This also has to do with a respect for authority. That teachers, police, or even other adults, if they speak in a proper way of speaking, don't run. That they should feel that respect. And that's put into them. And that you put them and bring them to that respect for authority. There's money and value and time and work that you start at an early age by not, one, giving into every desire that they have. That's a grandparent's job. That's not a parent's job. It is a grandparent's job, believe me. I'm a grandparent. True story, my granddaughters, I may have told this, but they were at school and they were selling some things. And they said to the people selling them, said, why don't you go ask your dad? And they said, oh, no, we should ask our papa. He lives in America. He would buy it for us. And they're probably right. I probably would have. Because they're my angels. But anyway, the thought behind that, though, is that you teach them responsibility. You teach them, it's not bad to have them pick up their room or the Legos they poured on the floor. I was talking to my sister-in-law who had gone to Legoland in somewhere, maybe Florida, I don't know where they had gone, but it was Legoland. Or maybe it was a cruise, a Lego cruise. I don't know what it was, but anyway, they'd gone on this. And the kids would play Legos all day, but then they would have the kids in the room clean up. And part of this was to get them tired. They would make a game out of it, but they would also clean it up. And part of it was to get them tired so they would go to bed and sleep, and then the adults could actually have some adult time, conversations and whatnots. And so the thought there was, we're going to teach them to clean up. If they make a mess, it's not bad for you to teach them to clean up, even at a young age. I understand if they backflood the toilet all over the bathroom floor, then it's probably not the, age at 2 years, 3 years old. Hey, here's a mop. Good luck. Right? I get that. But, if they pour out their blocks on the floor, it's not bad to teach them to pick up the blocks off the floor. That they can have a certain allowance of money when they reach an age of responsibility. Doesn't have to be much, but that they then can feel like, oh, I have some, and I can understand principles of spending and saving and giving and all of those kinds of realities of life that you're putting in there. And it's just being wise. Proverbs 10 and verse 1.
The Proverbs of Sullivan, a wise son makes a glad father, but a foolish son is the grief of his mother.
There's so many children that when they do misbehave in public, it mortifies the parents. Again, some of that's lost maybe out there, but, just that reality. And so you start at the early age. And these details you're going to have to work out as a couple, as a parent. You're going to have to figure out what's acceptable and what's not, what age you start, because it's not a one-size-fits-all. Some kids get it. You know, if I could borrow one child, Adria, that girl she was completing sentences at 2 years old, like 6-year-olds do. She was very vocal, very smart, very, but not all children are as gifted as that. Some are a little slower in the uptake. Some are, a little blockier head. And to pick on my gender, boys tend to be a little bit blockier head than girls, but it's not that girls don't have their moments. It just is what it is. So you have to realize that and understand bringing that to them, because your goal is to shape them. Not restrict them, not kill their personality, but shape them. And the early years are the critical years. Proverbs 17:21.
He who begets a scoffer does so to his sorrow, and the father of a fool has no joy.
Fool, or in the New Living Translation, a rebel. There's no joy. And they're rebelling against all of society, raging against the machine, and all these other album titles of rebellion that were out there in my generation. That thought of just trying to come against will come back on you. It becomes difficult. And so this isn't just for them, this is for you too. And the earlier you put it in, the limits you put on them, the discipline you bring. I just want to read this one, Proverbs. We'll read both of these, and again, you have to work this out on your own. But Proverbs 13:24.
Those who spare the rod of discipline hate their children. Those who love their children care enough to discipline them.
And Proverbs 23:13 and 14.
(23)
23:13 and 14.
Don't fail to discipline your children. The rod of punishment won't kill them. The physical discipline may well save them from death.
In the state of New York, it is not illegal to spank your children. It is not illegal, but there is a far gap between spanking and abuse. Just so you know. Some places it is illegal. The nation of Canada is actually illegal. Their polite society is going to go down the tubes because of it. And so you can work that out on your own, how you're going to handle that. Just my thoughts is you just have to be balanced. You have to figure out what works. And I'll just put this out there. I know a lot of parents, they use code words. They teach their children code words that have to do with it. That way they don't have to say in public, I'm going to beat you. That doesn't go over well with some of people, And so code words tended to work well. And so, that's the way some parents take care of that and deal with that. But, again, and I just want to add here that I know we had a bunch of children born a couple of years ago. Thank you, Ernie Toppin. But the reality is a lot of you are doing a very good job. But they're coming to a point now where they're going to challenge you on their will. They're getting to that 2-year-old mark. And they're going to challenge you in different areas. And I will add this, and then we'll open it up for questions and comments. Something my wife and I caught that was very interesting. This actually was more as they got to be older, a little bit, teenage years. But my daughter could turn on the charm and try to manipulate me. And I didn't get it. Oh, Daddy. And my heart melted because she's my baby, and I'm just like, yeah, okay. And my wife saw right through it. She said, no, 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 no. You're not doing that to your dad. I think her comment was, I'm the only one who gets to do that to your dad. But anyway, but my son, I caught him doing the same thing to my wife. And she didn't get it. She didn't get it. So I say that to say this. Listen to each other. Because whether it's your sons or whether it's your daughters, there's certain hardwired functions that are in there. That, yes, there are some generalities of children and people in general, yes, but boys and girls are different. And this isn't a blanket statement to say that this is going to happen. But there is a good chance that your wife will pick up on some of the things your daughter might be trying to get away with, that a dad won't get. And there's a good chance that a father will pick up on some of the things his son might be trying to get away with. Maybe because he did the same things. Maybe because she did the same things and she's going, I used to do that to my dad, and no. Or I used to be able to get my mom to do what I wanted, but no. So listen to each other. They're very, your spouse is very, very helpful in that realm of raising children. But this is wisdom. We're talking about being wise. And so there isn't necessarily a one-size-fits-all for this, but there is the understanding that you as a couple, given the personality of your children, are going to have to figure out what is acceptable, what is not. Manners, of course, you need to teach them that. These are kind of good. You need to teach them about God. But when it comes to the other areas of life, how much responsibility they can handle, screen time, these kind of things, you're going to have to work that out. Any questions or comments?
Yeah, just a couple of things. When the kids were little and they would scribble on the wall with crayons, they had to scrub it off.
Ooh.
But they would each do it, and one didn't learn from the other.
She had 6, and she's saying that one didn't learn from the other. They were a little spread out, though, so maybe they didn't get it quite, I don't think Carrie was telling Craig. I bet she was laughing. He's going to get it. Anyway.
The other thing that I just wanted to mention, that we agreed to when we were pretty young, I guess, raising the kids, was that when one was discipline the kids, and the other one, just really didn't agree or wanted them to go easy, and it went both ways. We agreed not to, in front of the kids, let them know that we disagreed on that.
Mm-hmm.
If he was disciplining them, I might have to go in the other room, and vice versa. But they didn't need to see there was any division there.
That united front is the best thing you can do. We're going to actually talk about that because that really comes into play in your teenage years. But even in the younger years. There was one time I do remember where and my wife would probably remember it better than I did. One of us didn't have all the facts. And so as soon as the facts came in, I remember once my brother took a stumble to the television set and bit his lip, and my father was convinced I had pushed him. But my mother happened to be in the room and said, no, he didn't push him, he just tripped. Right? So sometimes you don't have all the facts. And I mean, we were little. He was just a toddler just learning to walk. But in that understanding is, united front will really help you. That's an excellent comment. So next week we're going to talk about the teenage years. And that's going to include being a teenager and raising teenagers. Lord bless you. I'll start service in a few minutes.